We are 9 days away from kicking off the 2024 college football season for the West Virginia Mountaineers. And in episode 4 of the Gold and Blue Breakdown, Jonathan and I are going to take a look at what keeps us up at night when we think about the Mountaineers going into 2024. And we're going to have that discussion right after this word from this channel sponsor. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. And they are also licensed in the state of Virginia. So if you're in West Virginia or Virginia, call the injury attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner. Well, Jonathan, what is up, man? How are you?
Hey, I'm great, Couz. Hard to believe we're just outside of a week away from arguably one of the biggest football games of the year, opening Saturday. Doing really well. How about yourself?
Yeah, man, I tell you what, I can't the days aren't passing fast enough for me right now, man. I just can't wait to August 31st. It's not getting here soon enough for me. Of course, once it gets here, it'll fly by. You know how it always goes. But I'm excited. I haven't been this excited. I think I say this every year, though.
Yeah.
I don't think I've been this excited for a season opener in a long time. But again, I get this excited about every season. So
yeah, I think we're at a point where there's such an excitement, right, when camp starts, and just everybody is ready to get the ball going. And then that first maybe week or so of camp and the notes come out. And I feel like you kind of hit a little bit of a lull period where you're just ready to go.
Yep.
And you're seeing on Twitter, X, the back and forth between Penn State and West Virginia is picking up. And so we're close. And I think the energy level is really high.
Yep. Agreed. Before we get started, guys, don't forget to please like the video if you're watching it on YouTube. If you're listening to it, please throw us a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate it if you're listening on audio, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcast. Please follow us on X. The account for this show, the Gold and Blue Breakdown Show, is at @GBBreakdown_. You can also follow Jonathan and I on our individual accounts at Couz206 and at Jonathan K. Martin. It's Jonathan, Jonathan. So, Jonathan, let's dive right in, man. Let's just go ahead and start.
Sure.
What's the first thing that keeps you up at night as a West Virginia Mountaineer fan as we go into this season?
Yeah, so I'd say first off, it would be Garrett Green health. You know, I think it's pretty clear that he would be the undisputed leader of this football team. And there have been some health concerns. As great as Garrett is, he's not the biggest player on the field. Right. He likes to take chances. He takes risks. So for me, I think we both agree that we believe and we've read about the progression of Nico Markle as a backup quarterback. I don't think we're too upset about who we have that could come in. But I also don't think we want Garrett Green on the sideline either.
Correct.
So for me, for West Virginia to have the season that is maybe expected or hopeful, Garrett Green has to stay healthy the duration of this season. So for me, number one was easy. The health of Garrett Green keeps people up at night. It almost keeps me up. Have to keep him healthy.
Yep, agreed. And ironically, and now Jonathan and I, we don't rehearse this stuff before the show because it's more authentic. Okay, that way. That's actually one of the ones on my list too. But I wanted to take it a step further. Garrett obviously is top of the list, but injuries at key spots. And when I say key spots, I mean any position where they don't have a lot of depth, like safety, for example. There's more depth at safety than we've had in past years, but it's unknown depth. You know what I mean? It's guys who are improving, like Kiki Tarnu, like the kid from Colorado State. His name's escaping me at the moment.
TJ Crandall.
Yes, which he's let's just say DB position overall, right? Injuries at the DB position because I know he's a corner, but injuries in the secondary are a little concerning to me because that's been an issue for the past couple of years. Again, Garrett, if Garrett, we need Garrett to stay healthy. That's important. And Cole Taylor's another one. He is one of the premier pass catching tight ends in the Big 12. I would say maybe might put him second or third, at least third on that list, if not second, to be honest, behind Brent Keithy at Utah. So I think his health is important, and he's really the only proven pass catching tight end on the roster. Now, Traylon Davis is a proven player on the roster, but he's more of a blocking tight end, or at least he has been so far. So for me, it's the health of Garrett Green, number one, the secondary, number two, and Cole Taylor at the tight end spot, number three, because those are three positions I think are going to be critical this season, and we need to keep those guys healthy.
Yeah, you made a good point, Couz, because in the secondary, even though we believe that West Virginia has added more overall depth, we have seen in the past injuries just deplete the secondary.
Right.
And so that's a key, especially in a passing league. Great point on Cole Taylor. Traylon Davis is a veteran in the program now, but he is more of a blocker. And I'll tell you another area, and we've discussed this on prior episodes, running back. C.J. Donaldson hasn't been able to prove that he could go through a whole season. And so you love the 1-2 punch with Jaheim White and Donaldson, but you have to keep him healthy too. So we probably could have won injuries across the board, but there are definitely positions where I think it's definitely more important at certain positions.
Yeah. And, we don't want, even though Rodney Gallagher can play both ways, we don't want him to have to play a lot of snaps on defense, right? We need him on offense. So we don't want to get depleted to the point where he's playing a lot of snaps on that side of the ball. That's another concern. Number two, what is your second biggest thing that keeps you up at night when it comes to the Mountaineers going into 2024?
Yeah, so this one might surprise you a little bit. Special teams. West Virginia was good in certain areas of special teams last year. Michael Hayes was extremely accurate, especially from about 35, 40 yards in. I think 17 of 20, 17 of 21 last year. So you felt good when he was ran out. You can't take extra points for granted. But, boy, we saw special teams bite West Virginia in the rear end a couple times too. Houston comes to mind. Baylor comes to mind. So there's some games last year where I felt like it snuck up on this team, and it kind of bit them a little bit. So this may feel like an odd one to mention, but I feel like the reason I mentioned it is because West Virginia is going to be extremely competitive this year, and I think a lot of these games are going to come down to 3, 4, 7 points where special teams is going to play a huge role. I tell you another one, Oklahoma State last year. That was a 10th win. You feel pretty good you had that game at Oklahoma State going into the fourth quarter. And after that special teams blunder, it just unraveled quick. So I think we can point to 3, 4 plus parts of last season where special teams maybe cost a game or so, or maybe you went on to win one, but it was a little bit closer than it should have been because so for me at number two, it may be an odd choice to say special teams. I think because it's happened previously and because this year is going to be so close, it's important to shore up some of those issues you had last year.
Yeah, and that's a fair one. And I actually I would have put that probably as an honorable mention on my list. It didn't make my top three, but I did consider it. So a very fair one. I'm going to differ with this one though, unlike the first one, and I'm going to say we're all high on this offensive line. We feel like it's going to be good again. A lot of returning production, a lot of returning starts.
Yeah.
But are we underestimating the loss of Zach Frazier and Doug Nestor on the offensive line? Can this offensive line be as good as last season? That is something I am worried about. I didn't think they looked as good in the bowl game last year as they had in previous games. But again, that was Brandon Yates' first game starting at center. So I kind of, looked over that and thought it wasn't that big a deal, right? Because he's going to have an entire offseason, a spring, a summer, and a fall camp to prepare to play the position as the guy. So I'm not as worried about it, but in the back of my mind, I'm still, when I lay down my head on my pillow at night, I'm still thinking to myself, man, will they take a step back on the offensive line, even though these guys have experience? They're not Zach Frazier, and they're not Doug Nestor. Now, I'm not trying to disrespect those guys or and I love them to death, but they don't make Zach Frazier's every day. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's fair to question that. That's something I worry about. There is the offensive line continuing to perform at a high level without those two guys up front.
Yeah, you're losing a lot of starts between Nestor and Frazier, and by all accounts, it seems like Frazier's likely to end up starting for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. Yep. So that's what you lost. And so, yeah, completely agree. And that does prove what we discussed earlier with some injuries and some health and keeping people healthy. It's a concern. It's a concern, and the rugged nature of the conference in a long season, opening up with a physical Penn State team. So, point well taken. Point well taken. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but I might have that listed here.
Well, go ahead and let it out, because
they'll never believe that you and I do not exchange notes. I'd like to just flip this up and show you some of the notes that I come up with. Third, offensive line. I kid you not. I had it. So I don't know how much I can add to the conversation because you touched on it perfectly.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's kind of that you got to see it, right? We've heard about some of these guys that's coming up in the program, and by all accounts, there's a belief there that they're ready to take that. And like you said, I don't know that it's as much you're questioning what you have coming up. You're just acknowledging what moved on. Mm-hmm. And so, so for me, again, I know people that are watching this are not going to believe you and I weren't texting all day our points, but that was my third. And you could have made a case that I could have put that second and special teams third, but I did have it listed. It's just something that West Virginia had great success last year on the ground. Mm-hmm. Because of the offensive line. So do you get the same production this year up front to allow White and Donaldson, some of those guys, to continue to run the football, to keep Garrett healthy, which was my your number one point. So, I had to admit that's a concern, and you're going to be tested right out of the gate quick.
Correct.
So it'll be interesting to see how it looks.
Yep. As Coach Brown has said many times, they're not easing into this thing.
No.
My third one was – again, even though we touched on it early on when I mentioned injuries, but the secondary.
Yeah.
In 2022, West Virginia relied on a lot of transfers in the secondary, and it didn't work out real well. Last year it did mainly because of Benny Bishop, right?
Yeah.
This year they're having to do it again. Again, they had to go back to the well when it comes to transfers. They're relying on, they do have Jacoby Spells coming back, but he hasn't started much, if at all. They say he has had a good camp and he's improved a lot, but he's been banged up a little bit, which has been documented. And they're relying, obviously, we've got Garnet Hollis from Northwestern, Jaheim Joseph from Northwestern, a corner and safety respectively. They've got, like I mentioned, Kiki Tarnu. They've got CJ Crandall. I'm sure there's one I'm missing there, but Aiden Garnes.
Aiden Garnes, yeah.
And by all accounts, they've all looked really good. But again,
yeah,
3 of those guys are moving up a level.
Yeah.
In some cases, 2 levels. Can they do it at the Power 4 level? The guys that were brought in 2022 didn't really live up to expectations.
Yeah.
Can this group do it? I think they can. I think this group's more talented. I think they're doing a better job of scouting now in the portal with the help of Drew Fabianich now on staff. So I'm more confident now. But again, in the back of my mind, I can't help but go back to 2022, how much that secondary struggled.
Yeah.
Especially against Kansas and Andy Kotelnicki, who's the OC at Penn State now. I was at that game, and it haunts me to this day, seeing how confused their defense was, especially at the second and third levels. But again, will that secondary perform the way the coaching staff seems to think they will, based on what they've been saying in press conferences?
Yeah, and I didn't have it listed in my top 3, but it would easily be an honorable mention there, or a 3B if you want to put it. I'd encourage people to go back and listen to our interview with Garnet Hollis Jr. because one of the questions, I'm not sure if it was, I think it might have been me that asked him, there's a lot of moving parts back there this year. Guys moving up, guys transferring. I mean, we could rattle off 5 or 6 names.
Mm-hmm.
And he did talk about how he felt comfortable, how things have progressed. Everybody came in at a little bit at different time and got their feet wet at separate times, and it's allowed them to all just kind of keep the line moving. He talked about his relationship with Jaheim Joseph from Northwestern and how they kind of know what each other's thinking. So there are signs there, I believe, of it's going to work. But again, I feel like a broken record when I say they're going to be tested early and often. And so I will say that I feel a little bit more at peace with because of the depth. You know, they just West Virginia got depleted last year and in previous years. So I think the depth is there a little bit more this year. But it is a concern that the gelling of that unit. And so it appears by all accounts so far that the reviews have been solid. But that's important. It's important that there's a lot in that position group. There's a lot of new faces. And so be interesting to see how it works.
Yep. Agreed. One of the things too, Jonathan, that you and I kind of were, when we were talking about what we were going to do this show about, is we touched on was what could go right, what could go wrong for WVU this season. We kind of mentioned that in this discussion, but are there any other things in the back of your mind that, are concerns of yours, could go wrong, outside of what we've talked about tonight?
Yeah. And so I think they kind of go hand in hand a little bit, but I'll throw one at you that crossed my mind today. What could go wrong? Does Garrett Green not improve his accuracy? Let me preface this by saying, because these comments are going to come flying, I love Garrett Green, and I think he's exceptional. I think what he brings to this team, I don't know that it can be even judged in stats, right? I mean, his energy, his passion, his leadership. He's a great player. His accuracy wasn't the best last year. So what could go wrong is that there was an improvement there. I believe it will be, and by all accounts, following through camp and even the offseason, I believe it will. And so I can already tell that's going to be met online with a little bit of what are you talking about? Mm-hmm. I'm just throwing it out there. What if he doesn't progress with the percentages? You could make an argument that's a little bit of a concern, especially with this schedule. Am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy, because I think it's fair. And it's ironically, as I was getting ready for this show, I was listening to the Ruffino and Joe show. I don't know if you've heard of those guys or not.
Yeah.
And Blake Ruffino, to me, is kind of like a shock jock type guy. He's always throwing out these outlandish, and he literally said he thinks Garrett Green is a bad quarterback. Point blank, which I took exception to and fired off in the comment section, right? Yeah. I wasn't going to stand for that. I said, dude, you're going to totally ignore the 7. It's funny to me when people mention Garrett Green, and I'm not pointing this at you, but I'm going to rant for a minute.
Sure.
The national media, especially, most of the Big 12 people know how good Garrett Green is, right? But a lot of these national people, they want to talk about his low completion percentage. They completely ignore his 700 yards rushing and 29 total touchdowns. Any other quarterback in the country who runs for 700 yards is going to be front page news of how great they are.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, with Garrett Green, they never even want to talk about his running ability.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't even matter. Like it's not a part of the game. Everybody wants to focus on that completion percentage. In fairness, it is a concern, and it is something they need to improve on, because there are going to be teams, and it could be in the game one, where they're going to stack the box, and they could put a spy on Garrett Green, and they could say, all right, big boy, beat us with your arm. And he's got to do it. Now, he did it in the Houston game a year ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Houston, in that second half, he did that. But Houston's not Penn State. Let's be honest. Let's be fair about it. Penn State is going to be a lot better than Houston. And I've got faith that Garrett can do it, and he will do it, because I know he's worked his butt off in the offseason.
Yeah.
To fix his mechanics and all that. But when the bullets start flying and they're on the field on August 31st, and he's got that highly talented Penn State defense coming at him, Abdul Carter coming off the edge, assuming Wyatt Milam allows him to get by. That'll be a great matchup, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
And they force him to throw the ball. Will he be able to do it consistently? So it's definitely a concern. But it was ironic you brought that up because that Ruffino and Joe show thing was fresh on my mind. But man, he was absolute. Now, Joe, his partner, he was like, man, you're underestimating West Virginia. He actually picked West Virginia to cover the spread. He didn't pick them to win, but he picked them to cover the spread.
Yeah.
Whereas Blake Ruffino was like, man, there's no way they can't. They have no chance. They're not talented enough. Garrett Green's too bad. He can't throw the football.
Yeah.
And I saw a tape the other day that Garrett can't throw the ball over 40 yards. I'm like, dude, have you ever watched the kid play?
Yeah, that's silliness.
And that guy was a West Virginia fan, by the way. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, and you'll notice, I'll say this. You notice I didn't list it under what keeps you up at night.
Right.
It's there. It happened. We believe that it's improved. But if we're saying a concern, what could go wrong is that it doesn't happen. I shared on X, and I'm sure you saw it, and everybody watching this saw where Neal Brown went on Marty McGee, and he was fired up.
Yeah,
we were kind of laughing today. We love goatee Neal Brown. It seems like he's a different person.
Yeah.
What was it at the top 100 players, and Garrett Green wasn't even mentioned.
Garrett nor Wyatt.
To your point. Yeah. And I think he'd said, Wyatt was going to be a first, second round pick, and he's not one of the top 100 players. How's that happen? It is frustrating to see Garrett not. It's almost like some of these guys are looking for that drop back 6'3", 220, just pocket QB, and they're not going to give the benefit of what he did with these legs. That's Garrett. So it's going to be interesting to me this season to see just something to watch if he does. And I think he will. You can't convince me, knowing Garrett like we know him, that wasn't priority number one this offseason. And darn it, I believe he's going to fix it. Just throwing it out there. That what if it doesn't? I think the margin for error this year, Couz, is going to be so thin.
Oh, absolutely. Because the Big 12 is there's so much parity.
It is. And that's why I threw in a special teams this year, because I truly believe what I said earlier. I think there's going to be so many games that are 3, 4, 7 points. And it is going to be that special teams, that kick, that blocked kick, that dropped punt return. Or it could be that 8-yard pass over the middle to a wide open receiver. And so I think Garrett's worked on it. We know he's worked on it. I think he'll improve, but just throwing it out there.
It's fair. Hey, it's fair, man. Trust me.
I love Garrett. I listen, and we both do.
Yeah.
We have, in a sense, to heck with the national media. We've seen enough of Garrett Green. We know what he brings. But it is something that for West Virginia to be better, let's put it like this: for West Virginia to be better this year, that percentage rate has to improve.
Correct.
But I think he knows it, and I think it will. And I think it will.
I do too. And what I don't want us to do as a fan base is, if let's just say game one doesn't go well, okay, and it's possible it won't, right? And let's say Garrett doesn't have a good game throwing the football. I don't want the fan base. We don't need to overreact to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's still a long season. We will anyway, because that's what we do. But we've got to guard against that, because it's a long season. It's not a Big 12 game. You know what I mean? Losing to Penn State is not the end of the world. West Virginia still has a conference championship they can go win. You know what I mean? So I don't want that one, even though we would love to win it. It'd be huge for the program. Big time victory. At the end of the day, it has no bearing on your conference standings.
Yeah.
So if he has a bad game, or even if the team has a bad game, I don't want us to overreact to that.
Yeah, and going back to the our Gordon Hollis interview, he said as much, that they feel like they can beat Penn State, but if it doesn't happen, it doesn't defer from the goal of winning a Big 12 championship.
Exactly.
And I love that mentality. So it is important. It is important to take note of that.
And by the way, anybody at West Virginia, if you're listening, West Virginia administration, if you're listening to this, it was not our interview.
No.
It caused him to go. It wasn't our interview where he went out and said that y'all were going to punch Penn State in the mouth. Just for the record, he did not say that on our show.
No, he didn't. And we didn't bait him in either. So, no. It wasn't. No. But, hey, I love the attitude. And we've talked about that. You know, and I think coming from somebody, it's a little off topic here, but I think coming from somebody that has played Penn State several times, I think he knows what it takes. And I think I'll tell you something else I took from it too, is I think he knows what type of team West Virginia has. And I think, if anything, I took it as he believes in the guys he's going to battle with. Agreed.
Now, real quick, the one thing that could go wrong for me, what if the defense doesn't improve from last year like we think it will? That's a concern to me. We think it's going to be better. We think the talent brought in from the portal is going to be better than some of the guys we lost, with a couple of exceptions.
Yeah.
We expect the Sean Martins of the world, the Edward Vesterinens of the world, the Pathorma Mobiles of the world to be a lot better, to be even better this year than they were a year ago. We expect to get more quarterback sacks than they did a year ago, force more turnovers, all that. But there's a chance.
There's a chance
that they won't.
Yeah.
That's a concern to me.
Yeah, because there's so many new players on that defense.
Yep.
And if you wanted to couple injuries, the defense it could be. I was trying to think of where I wanted to go with it. I think you could talk about health the same way you could talk about the moving parts. Example, secondary, we touched on that. So many new players, but also moving up. Defensive line, you lost some quality players there. Feel good about who you replaced them with, but moving up from Gardner Webb, moving up from Troy. Health at linebacker. There were some injuries there last year. And so are those guys, after missing a season last year, is Trotter, is he fully healthy? We think so, but he's fresh back off of an injury. Latham, we feel good about his progression from his injury last year, but that was a nasty injury. So what if it doesn't? And I think that goes back to the greater point that we've made, is that the margin for error is going to be difficult this year with who you're playing. So many top 25 teams, caliber teams, it has to go right. So the good thing, Kate, taken away from it is we've established that I don't think I'm crazy and I don't think you're crazy. It's a concern that they're going to be tested, and so we'll see.
All right, let's flip the script and be more positive. What's one thing that could go right this season for West Virginia?
So this one was a little bit tough. Actually, crazy enough, some of the other things hit me pretty easy. What could go right? And this is going to sound silly, but here's my point. What could go right? Everybody stays healthy, and West Virginia plays for a Big 12 championship. If you look at the biggest matches collectively, I've got golf on my mind. If you look at the biggest games this year, they're all at home. Minus Oklahoma State. Penn State's at home. Kansas State's at home. Iowa State's at home. Kansas is at home. The biggest games of the year that could make or break you are at home. UCF is at home. I've told you, don't sleep on UCF. That game's at home. So I think what could go right is that everybody stays healthy, that we talked about. And because these games are at home, West Virginia plays let's say Utah, the winner of Utah and Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship. Now, I might be crazy on this one, but a lot has to go right. A lot.
No, you're not crazy at all. You're not crazy at all because I think it's doable. I really do. I'm not predicting it to happen or even expecting it to happen, but I do think it's extremely possible.
Yeah.
I'm going to go a little bit more in the weeds and get a little bit more detailed on that one. I think West Virginia could have an elite pass rush this year.
Okay.
I'm not going to put a number of sacks on it in this episode, but I would like to do that maybe in a future episode, maybe. But I just think that I think West Virginia is going to do a much better job getting to what could go right. They could get do a much better job of getting to the quarterback this year. Last year they had a lot of QB hurries. They were in the backfield a lot, but they did have a lot of sacks. Now I don't want to make it sound like they didn't. I think they led the Big 12 in sacks actually, but it seemed like they could have had a lot more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Sean Martin, I think, had over 20 QB hurries last year or something, but he only had 3.5 sacks, I think. So that's just one example. I'm not trying to, call him out. That's just one example.
Yeah.
But they're supposedly moving to a 3-4 scheme. They brought Ty French in, who's supposed to be an elite pass rusher off the edge.
I love him.
Tyron Bradley is supposed to be better coming off the edge. They expect Sean to be better. They expect TJ Jackson to help in that regard. Maybe even Edward Vestorinen gets to the quarterback more. It's not really for Cormer Mobile's job to do so, but maybe he gets a few sacks. So I would love for West Virginia's defense, and I think it's very possible, if they can wreak havoc and cause a lot of problems in backfields this season, it could create turnovers for the defense. And the one thing I said could go wrong, how do you offset even if the defense isn't better, quote, statistically, how do you offset it? By forcing turnovers. How do you force turnovers? By making the quarterback make quick decisions, right? Or forcing fumbles. And you do that by getting into the backfield a lot. And I think this defense, that's one thing that could go right this year, is this defense could really, really be much improved in forcing turnovers because of more backfield disruption, so to speak.
Yeah.
Chaos. I think there's a havoc rate. Maybe their havoc rate is higher this year than it was a year ago.
Yeah. Well, they wanted to make athleticism a point of emphasis in the portal. And they did that. They did that. And so I think that's something that we'll see. I think that pass rush, a defensive secondary's best friend is a quality defensive line.
Yep.
And so, it's a good point. I'll give you a crazy one too, not on the field, but what if Neal Brown wins Big 12 Coach of the Year? It's no secret that in the past, I haven't been the biggest fan of Neal Brown. I thought early on there were some coaching on-field decisions I didn't like. Felt like it took him a little bit longer to get the program to where it is. And I'm asked a lot what changed, because I'm a Neal Brown fan. I've always liked Neal Brown. Thought he was the right guy for the job. Took a little longer than I expected.
Right.
But Neal Brown looked at himself in the mirror, I believe, found points of weaknesses, and he fixed them. And manned up and got problems solved. And I think he got a lot of credit for last year for 9 wins. And if what could go right, they play in the Big 12 championship, you'd almost seemingly think he would be in the running and potentially be. So that's kind of another off the field one. It seems like the relationship with Neal Brown and West Virginia has smoothed, but was rocky. And could you imagine a scenario where he's Big 12 Coach of the Year?
That'd be awesome. And I'm gonna throw another one out to you, and we'll wrap this baby up. But I think, what if West Virginia has multiple guys get drafted in the draft next year? I think that's also possible. And that hasn't happened at West Virginia in quite some time.
Yeah. Yeah, I could see it.
So,
I mean, you think obviously you feel really good about. You could probably name a couple off the top of your head. Wyatt Milam. I think there is a place for Garrett Green in NFL. I'm not sure if it, where it would be, but the athleticism is there.
A lot of it's going to depend on how well he plays this year. Honestly, he could play his way into the NFL.
He could. Secondary, we feel there are some guys there that could eventually play.
Maybe
and even at linebacker. And I think that goes to the greater point of, you've got to keep this team healthy for a lot of this stuff to work. And so we're going to find out soon. But razor thin.
Agreed. And it's a lot of that. Well, I think it's like that for everybody in the league, but on paper, when you look at West Virginia's schedule, golly, man, speaking of things that we should have led with that one. What keeps me up at night? That friggin' schedule keeps me up at night. Yeah. Seeing that 5-game gauntlet of Kansas State, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, and Arizona.
Yeah.
That keeps me up at night, every night and all day.
I know it. Yeah, that's a good one too. Yeah, that's a good one too. And we could talk about what could go right, what could go wrong. There's so many things, that could happen. And because the Big 12 is going to be as competitive of a league as we think it will be, and I don't think it's unrealistic to say 6-7 teams could be vying for the Big 12 championship. A lot's going to have to go, admittingly, in West Virginia's favor.
Yep. And for the 1 or 2 people that's going to come in the comments and say it's all just talk, it's all what ifs, of course it is, because we've got to have something to talk about until the games start.
Yep, coming up, coming soon.
That's right. So we can't wait, and we're going to have some awesome content for you guys once the season starts. Previews, reviews, all that kind of stuff. Key players, key matchups, all that kind of stuff is going to be coming your way each week. So we're looking forward to it. Starting next week. So
yeah.
Well, Jonathan, real quick, let everybody know where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, primarily on X, Twitter, at Jonathan K. Martin. That's THAN. There's no H in John, so easy to find. And we'll be rolling out a lot of content. We already are, but it's going to be a fun season and be a good place to find both of us.
Yep. And don't forget about the Go Blue Breakdown Show's account at GB Breakdown _. Come check us out over there. And then you can find me there at Couz at COUZ 206 on X as well. You can also find me on Instagram, TikTok, but I'm not active on there much. So if you want to interact with me, and I do have a website, couzascorner.com. You can reach out to me there. There's a place where you can shoot me an email. So that's also a way you can find me. So, and shameless plug, Jonathan does a lot of great articles on X articles that you can check out. And there are some really good articles over there on my site too that have been written by some writers over there, and I've done a few myself. So come check that out as well. But Jonathan, thanks again, man, for doing this with me.
Looking forward to it. It's hard to believe we're just kind of getting this ball rolling, but it's going to get real serious soon. So I'm looking forward to it.
I can't wait. It's going to be fun, man. It's going to be a fun ride. Hopefully.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Well, we're going to make it fun regardless.
That's right. That's right. And thanks to all of you for listening, watching, wherever you're consuming this content. We appreciate the support. Again, 5-star reviews on the podcast platforms, thumbs up, comments, all that on YouTube really helps. And again, shout out to Cats, Kenner, Stone Street, and Buckner for sponsoring the show. If you've been injured in an accident or you or a family member has been a victim of medical malpractice, they are who you call. Go to yourlawyeryourvoice.com. Thanks to them for helping us keep the lights on. Until next time, Q Country Roads.